What if I told you that the legendary Knights Templar never vanished, that their greatest secret still lies hidden beneath the Atlantic waves? For centuries, whispers of a lost fleet and a treasure that could rewrite history have haunted explorers, kings, and secret societies. Tonight, we follow a trail of blood, stone, and coded symbols that might finally reveal the truth. The night of October 13th, 1307, Paris was silent. A cold mist rolled over the Seine as church bells struck midnight. In the heart of the city stood the Temple, a massive fortress of stone, home to the legendary Knights Templar and their treasure hoard. For nearly 2 centuries, the Templars had been the most powerful military order in Christendom, protectors of pilgrims and keepers of unimaginable wealth. But that night, their world was about to end. By dawn, King Philip IV's soldiers would storm the temple, arresting every knight they could find under charges of heresy. Yet, when the sun rose, something extraordinary was discovered. The vaults were empty. No gold. No relics. No sacred artifacts. It was as if the treasure had simply evaporated into the night. Witnesses later swore they had seen a column of Templar wagons leaving the fortress just hours before the raid, heading west toward the sea. Whispers spread quickly through Paris. The Templars had outwitted the king. Somewhere beyond the city walls, a secret convoy was carrying away the Order's most sacred possessions, perhaps even the Holy Grail itself. Some claimed the wagons vanished into thin air, others that they reached the port of La Rochelle, where a fleet of Templar ships waited in the fog. Those ships, too, disappeared without a trace. That single night gave birth to one of history's greatest mysteries. Where did the treasure go? Who guided the escape? And why has no one ever found a single coin of it since? The answers, if they exist, might still be hidden beneath ancient ruins, on forgotten islands, or locked in codes carved into weathered stone. The convoy that left the Paris Temple was no ordinary escape. According to scattered chronicles, there were 9 wagons, heavily guarded, covered with black cloth. Some carried gold and silver, others contained objects of great spiritual importance, relics, scrolls, perhaps even sacred artifacts the church itself had feared to lose. But the most mysterious cargo, legends say, was a set of maps and coded manuscripts, the key to the Templars' hidden network of safe houses and secret treasuries across Europe. The wagons travelled by moonlight, taking back roads to avoid royal patrols. Each knight had sworn an oath of silence, prepared to die rather than reveal the destination. When the convoy reached La Rochelle 3 days later, the Templar fleet was waiting, a dozen ships, their sails black against the horizon. By dawn, the ships were gone, swallowed by the Atlantic fog. For centuries, treasure hunters have searched for any trace of those ships. Some believe they reached Scotland, finding refuge with Robert the Bruce, whose excommunication by the Pope made him a natural ally. Others insist the Templars sailed farther, to Portugal, where they founded the Order of Christ, or perhaps even to the New World, decades before Columbus. But if the treasure crossed the ocean, where did it land? Clues may lie in the cryptic carvings found in chapels and graveyards linked to the Templars. Strange symbols appear repeatedly, a pair of crossed keys, a rose, a compass pointing west. To those who can read them, these marks might form a hidden map, a guide to the greatest treasure hoard in history. In the summer of 1314, 7 years after the arrest of the Templars, Scotland faced annihilation. The English army, led by King Edward II, was marching north with 25,000 men, determined to crush Robert the Bruce's rebellion once and for all. At Bannockburn, just outside Stirling, the Scots were hopelessly outnumbered. A ragtag force of barely 8,000 stood against a sea of armoured knights. Then, according to some accounts, something extraordinary happened. On the second day of battle, as the English cavalry prepared a final charge, a strange group of mounted warriors appeared on the ridge. They were clad in white surcoats marked with red crosses, the emblem of the Templars. Witnesses swore they rode with impossible discipline, their lances gleaming, their banners unfamiliar. The sight was enough to send panic through the English ranks, who believed a fresh army had joined the fight. Confusion spread, and soon the English line broke. Robert the Bruce's victory at Bannockburn became legendary, a turning point in Scotland's fight for independence. But who were those mysterious riders? Some historians dismiss them as a myth, a tale invented to glorify the Scottish king. Others believe they were survivors of the Templar Purge, who had fled France with their treasure and sworn loyalty to Bruce in exchange for sanctuary. If true, the Templar fleet may have carried not just gold, but the last living knights of the Order, warriors who would secretly shape the future of Scotland. And if they were in Scotland, then perhaps the treasure, or part of it, still lies hidden somewhere in the Highlands, beneath the ruins of old monasteries or buried under ancient cairns, waiting for someone to decipher the clues left behind. 7 centuries later, the legend of the lost Templar fleet still haunts historians and adventurers alike. Among them is Dr. Eleanor Hayes, an Oxford-trained archaeologist with a fascination for forbidden history. For years, she has followed the trail of strange symbols carved into church walls and gravestones across Europe. Each clue points north, toward Scotland, toward the very battleground of Bannockburn. Eleanor's latest find is the most startling yet, a weathered stone slab discovered beneath the floor of a ruined chapel near La Rochelle. Etched into its surface is a set of coordinates, alongside the unmistakable image of the Templar cross. When she deciphers the markings, the coordinates point directly to Stirling, Scotland. It is the breakthrough she has been waiting for. But Eleanor is not the only one searching. Rumors of the Templar treasure have drawn the attention of private collectors, secret societies, and those who would do anything to possess what the Knights protected. A mysterious benefactor offers to fund her expedition, a man known only as the Curator, whose motives remain unclear. With her team assembled, Eleanor sets off for the Highlands. As their plane descends into the misty Scottish countryside, the ancient landscape seems to whisper secrets. Crumbling castles stand like silent sentinels, and the air feels heavy with centuries of untold history. Somewhere among these hills lies the answer to one of the greatest enigmas of the Middle Ages. But Eleanor knows that the Templars did not leave their secrets unguarded. The question is not just whether she can find the treasure, but whether she can survive what waits for those who dare to seek it. The team's first stop is Bannockburn itself. The battlefield has changed over the centuries, but Eleanor believes that somewhere beneath the fields lies a clue left by the Templars who fought there. She and her assistant, Mark, survey the site with ground-penetrating radar. Hours pass with no results, until the scanner beeps, detecting a hollow chamber deep below the soil. They dig carefully, uncovering a stone marker sealed with wax and bearing the faint imprint of a red cross. Inside lies a small lead tube, its contents dry but perfectly preserved. When Eleanor unrolls the parchment within, she gasps. It is a map, not of Scotland, but of the Western Seas, with a line drawn from La Rochelle to a point far across the Atlantic. Could this be proof that the Templar fleet sailed to the New World? Before she can celebrate, Mark notices something strange: fresh tire tracks in the mud. They had been alone when they arrived, but someone else has been watching. As dusk falls, Eleanor spots a dark SUV parked just beyond the tree line. The driver doesn't move, doesn't leave, just waits. That night, back at their inn, Eleanor receives an anonymous message slipped under her door: "Stop digging. Some secrets must stay buried." Her heart pounds. This is no longer just an academic adventure. Someone out there knows what she is looking for, and is willing to stop her from finding it. That night, the Scottish inn where Eleanor and her team are staying is unusually quiet. A storm rages outside, wind howling through the old windows. Around midnight, Eleanor is awakened by a faint creak on the floorboards. At first, She thinks it's just the building settling, until she hears the unmistakable sound of a door latch clicking open. She grabs her flashlight and steps into the hallway, heart pounding. The air smells faintly of smoke. When she reaches the common room, she freezes. Someone has pinned a dagger to the wooden table, its blade impaling the parchment map they had found at Bannockburn. Scrawled in charcoal across the map is a single word: Leave. Mark rushes in behind her, but whoever left the message is gone. No footprints in the mud outside, no vehicles pulling away, just the storm, and the feeling that unseen eyes are still watching from the darkness. Back in her room, Eleanor considers turning back. The discovery is priceless, but what good is a breakthrough if it puts her team in danger? Yet as she examines the map again, she notices something she had missed: a series of tiny dots along the Atlantic route, perhaps marking ports where the Templars stopped on their mysterious voyage. Each one is labeled with strange symbols: sun, moon, and star, as if describing a celestial code. "This is too important to abandon," Eleanor whispers. If the Templars risked everything to hide this, there must be a reason. The decision is made. At dawn, they pack their equipment and head north toward Rosslyn Chapel, the legendary church said to hold the secrets of the Templars. But as they drive into the misty highlands, a dark SUV pulls onto the road behind them, and doesn't fall back. Rosslyn Chapel loomed ahead like something out of a dream, its intricate stonework shrouded in fog, gargoyles glaring down as if to warn visitors away. Eleanor had studied the chapel for years. Built in the 15th century, it was said to contain hidden messages carved into its walls by surviving Templars. If the map was real, Rosslyn might hold the next piece of the puzzle. Inside, the air was cold and still. Dust motes floated in the shafts of light streaming through stained glass windows. Eleanor ran her fingers over the carvings: angels, vines, stars, and then she saw it. A symbol identical to the one etched on the Bannockburn parchment, a sun flanked by two crescents. It was carved at the base of the apprentice pillar, one of Rosslyn's most mysterious features. Mark carefully shone a UV light over the stone, and faint lines appeared, invisible to the naked eye. Together, they formed a constellation map pointing west, toward the Atlantic once more, but with a new clue: a compass rose that seemed to indicate latitude and longitude. Before Eleanor could photograph it, a sound echoed through the chapel: footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, approaching from the entrance. She quickly tucked the parchment into her jacket. The figure that stepped into view was tall, wearing a long coat and gloves, the same man who had been watching them in Bannockburn. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice calm but cold. "The Order has guarded this secret for centuries. Turn back, or you will not leave Scotland alive." Eleanor stood her ground. "The Templars swore to protect the truth, not bury it forever," she said. "And I intend to finish what they started." The man didn't reply. He simply turned and disappeared into the mist outside, leaving the threat hanging in the air like a blade. Eleanor knew there was no turning back now. The treasure, whatever it truly was close enough to touch. The mist over the Scottish Highlands thickened as Eleanor's team sped away from Rosslyn Chapel. The road wound like a serpent through dark pine forests, every turn threatening to reveal headlights in the rearview mirror. Mark gripped the wheel tighter. "They're still behind us," he said, glancing at the SUV that now followed openly, its lights glaring like predators' eyes. "Head for the coast," Eleanor ordered. "The next coordinate points to Orkney. If we can make it to the ferry, we'll lose them." The chase grew more dangerous as the road narrowed. Rain slicked the asphalt, and every sharp curve could send them skidding into the ravine. Then, without warning, the SUV accelerated, pulling alongside them. A masked passenger rolled down the window and hurled a metal spike. It struck their tire with a loud pop. The car wobbled violently, but Mark kept control and swerved down a side road that plunged toward the sea. The SUV hesitated, then followed. Eleanor quickly grabbed a flare from their gear bag and lit it. As they sped under a low stone bridge, she tossed the flare into a pile of wet brush they had passed moments earlier. The sudden burst of fire startled their pursuers just enough for Mark to make a sharp turn onto an unmarked dirt path. Minutes later, they skidded to a stop near an abandoned fishing hut. The SUV roared past, missing their turn. Eleanor's chest heaved as silence returned, broken only by the rain and the distant crash of waves. Inside the hut, they unrolled the map again. The constellation markings from Rosslyn aligned perfectly with the parchment they had found, pointing not just to Orkney, but to a specific island off its coast, a place known in Old Norse legends as the Isle of the Grail. For the first time, Eleanor felt the weight of what they might actually be chasing. If the Templars had brought their most sacred relics here, this could be more than gold or jewels. It could be history-shattering. By dawn, Eleanor and her team reached the Orkney ferry. The sea was rough, grey waves crashing against the hull, but the crossing gave them a few hours of an easy calm. The islands appeared on the horizon like jagged teeth, windswept and desolate, dotted with stone ruins older than recorded history. Somewhere out there, Eleanor believed, the Templar trail waited. Their destination was a small, uninhabited isle off the main coast. Local fishermen spoke of it in hushed tones, calling it a cursed place. No one stays there after dark, an old man warned as he handed them a boat key. Bad things walk on that shore. When they landed, the island was silent except for the wind. At its center stood the remains of a stone church, its roof long collapsed, its altar cracked in two. Eleanor approached the altar and brushed away centuries of moss, revealing a carving of the same compass rose she had seen in Rosslyn Chapel. Beneath it were words in Latin, Adicasum veriters, ere to the west lies the truth. Mark searched the ground nearby and uncovered a stone slab with iron rings. With effort, they pried it open, revealing a narrow stairway descending into darkness. The air that rose from below smelled of salt and dust, as if the chamber had not been opened in centuries. But just as Eleanor prepared to go down, the sound of an engine echoed across the island. The dark SUV had found them. Figures in black stepped out, moving quickly toward the ruins. "They're here," a Mark said, fear creeping into his voice. Eleanor grabbed a lantern and descended into the darkness. "Then we'll have to move faster," Ishi said. "If this is where the Templars hid their secret, we can't let it fall into their hands." The stairway beneath the ruined chapel was narrow and steep, carved into solid rock. Eleanor held the lantern high, casting flickering light on walls etched with symbols, crosses, stars, and strange geometric patterns she had never seen before. Each marking seemed to hum with history, as if the stone itself remembered the footsteps of the knights who had walked here centuries ago. At the bottom, they found a heavy iron door, rusted but intact. Prying it open revealed a small chamber, barely large enough for 3 people. Inside were wooden crates, leather-bound scrolls, and several metal chests adorned with intricate Templar insignia. Eleanor's hands trembled as she carefully lifted the lid of the largest chest. Inside lay a collection of relics, a ceremonial dagger, a carved chalice, and, most importantly, a series of maps. Unlike anything they had seen before, these maps detailed a route across the Atlantic, with a series of hidden islands marked along the way, possible stopping points for the lost Templar fleet. Notes in Latin hinted at a treasure beyond gold, a secret that could change the understanding of history itself. Suddenly, a shadow fell across the chamber entrance. The SUV had arrived, and the pursuers were inside the chapel. Eleanor grabbed the maps, hiding them under her coat, as the sound of footsteps grew louder. They were trapped. The only escape was the narrow stairway, and the men behind them were armed and determined. Eleanor whispered to Mark, "We have the key. Now we just have to survive long enough to follow it." As they backed into the shadows, the chamber seemed to close in around them, the weight of centuries pressing down, reminding them that the Templars had guarded their secrets for a reason, and that those who sought them were always in danger. The footsteps grew louder, echoing off the stone walls. Eleanor signaled Mark and the rest of the team to follow her carefully along a narrow passage that wound deeper into the rock. The pursuers' voices shouted commands above, but the underground corridors twisted unpredictably, and the hunters had no idea of the labyrinth they were entering. Suddenly, the floor beneath their feet gave a hollow thump. A trapdoor swung open beneath one of the team's members. A startled yelp echoed in the chamber, but Eleanor grabbed his arm, pulling him back to safety. Every step was perilous. Centuries-old stones threatened to crumble underfoot, and the stale air made each breath a struggle. Finally, they emerged into a hidden exit at the edge of the island, where waves crashed violently against jagged rocks. The SUV was visible on the cliff above, its occupants scanning for any sign of movement. Eleanor led her team to the water's edge, where a small rowboat had been hidden among the rocks. With careful haste, they rowed into the churning sea, oars cutting through the grey waves. Behind them, the dark SUV waited, its headlights glaring down from the cliffs like watchful eyes. Eleanor held the Templar maps close, the keys to centuries-old secrets tucked under her coat. As the coastline faded behind them, she allowed herself a brief moment of hope. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, the pieces of the Templars' hidden network were beginning to fall into place. Somewhere across the Atlantic, their final destination awaited, a place that might finally reveal the truth of the lost fleet and the treasure it carried. But Eleanor knew this: the hunters would not give up. The game was far from over, and the stakes were higher than ever. Weeks later, Eleanor and her team sailed across the Atlantic, guided by the ancient Templar maps and the constellation markers from Rosslyn Chapel. The ocean was vast and merciless, a grey expanse of rolling waves and mist. Every day, the team cross-referenced the parchment, noting islands, hidden coves, and old port markings, trying to trace the secret route the Templar fleet may have taken centuries ago. The first clue came from a small, uncharted island in the Caribbean, barely visible on modern maps. According to local legend, it had once been a haven for pirates and adventurers, and long before that, travelers claimed it was touched by mysterious visitors who left cryptic symbols carved into the rocks. Eleanor landed with her team and began exploring. Among the jagged cliffs and dense vegetation, they found what they were looking for: a stone plinth, carved with the same sun and crescent emblem that had guided them across Europe. Embedded in the plinth was a small iron box, corroded but intact. Inside were fragments of a navigational log, notes in Latin and Old French describing a fleet, its route, and a destination that none of the maps had revealed before. But Eleanor's relief was short-lived. Across the bay, a shadow moved. The dark SUV was back. Somehow, her pursuers had crossed the ocean as well. And now, in this remote corner of the world, there would be no hiding. Every secret the Templars had protected for centuries was at risk of being uncovered or stolen. Eleanor stared at the horizon, the iron box in her hands. This was only the beginning. The real hunt for the lost Templar treasure had just begun. The island was small, but it seemed to breathe secrets from every rock and tree. Eleanor spread the fragments of the navigational log on a flat stone, tracing lines with her finger. The notes were riddles, written in Latin and Old French, hinting at hidden coves, underground tunnels, and symbols carved into ancient stone. It was clear, the Templars had left a trail of clues, a labyrinth only the clever or the brave could navigate. Mark examined the surroundings, noting unnatural formations among the cliffs. "These rocks, they're not random," he said. "Look at the angles. They form a pattern, like a star map." Eleanor's heart raced. The Templars had always used celestial markers to guide their way, and now, centuries later, she was following them across the same constellations. But danger was closing in. From a hidden vantage point, their pursuers watched every move. The SUV was parked under a canopy of palm trees, inconspicuous yet menacing. A small rowboat in the cove suggested that they had already sent scouts ahead. Eleanor realized that the traps they had faced in Scotland were nothing compared to the cunning of these men. Carefully, Eleanor decoded the first instruction. Beneath the twin palms at the heart of the island lies the gate unseen by mortal eyes. They hurried through the dense jungle, guided by sunlight breaking through the canopy, until they found the twin palms, two towering trees standing unnaturally close together. Beneath their roots, a shallow pit revealed a carved stone hatch. It was heavy, covered in centuries of moss, but it moved under Eleanor's determined hands. Inside lay a spiral staircase descending into the darkness. A faint breeze carried the scent of salt and earth. Eleanor whispered, "The Templars left more than gold here. This is history waiting to be revealed." From the shadows above, the sounds of movement reminded her that the hunters were near. Every step deeper into the labyrinth could be their last if they weren't careful. The spiral staircase led them deep beneath the island, into a chamber carved from living rock. The air was thick with the smell of salt and damp stone, and Eleanor's lantern revealed walls lined with carvings, intricate patterns of crosses, stars, and unrecognizable glyphs. This was no ordinary hiding place. It had been constructed with careful precision, a sanctum meant to guard secrets for centuries. At the center of the chamber stood a pedestal, and atop it rested a small, ornate chest, bound with iron and etched with the unmistakable Templar cross. Eleanor's hands trembled as she lifted the lid. Inside lay a ceremonial dagger, its hilt inlaid with gemstones, and beside it a golden amulet shaped like a sun encircled by crescent moons, the same symbols they had followed from Rosslyn to the Caribbean. Mark carefully examined the amulet. "Look at these inscriptions," he whispered. "They're coordinates, not just in the Caribbean, but across the Atlantic." Eleanor realized this was more than treasure. It was a guide, a key left by the Templars to their final, hidden destination. But the echo of footsteps on the stone above reminded them that they were not alone. The hunters had followed them, and time was running out. Eleanor grabbed the chest and tucked the relics into her pack. As they ascended the staircase, the shadows of their pursuers appeared at the hatch above. The team raced through the winding corridors, hearts pounding, aware that one misstep could trap them in the darkness forever. Each step carried them closer to the surface, and closer to the next clue, which promised to reveal the Templars' greatest secret yet. Eleanor and her team emerged from the shadowy tunnels into the golden glow of the Caribbean sun. The dense jungle around the chamber seemed to exhale centuries of secrets as they paused to catch their breath. But there was no time to linger. The hunter's presence was undeniable. A distant shout and the rumble of the SUV moving through the trees reminded them that every second counted. Unpacking the relics, Eleanor carefully laid the dagger and amulet beside the parchment fragments from the underground chamber. Together, they formed a single, coherent map, one that traced a route across the Atlantic, dotted with mysterious islands and marked with Templar symbols. Some of the locations corresponded to old pirate legends, others pointed to uncharted land. The Templars didn't just hide gold, Eleanor said, tracing her finger along the route. They were protecting knowledge, something powerful enough to rewrite history if it ever surfaced. Mark nodded, eyes scanning the distant horizon. "And it looks like someone else wants it too." Suddenly, a branch snapped nearby. Eleanor grabbed the relics, and they sprinted toward the hidden cove where their boat awaited. The hunters were fast, but the island's terrain favored those who knew its secrets. With skill and courage, the team launched into the turquoise waters, leaving the island behind, carrying not just treasure, but a mystery that had survived centuries. As the waves carried them westward, Eleanor couldn't help but feel the weight of what they were chasing. Across the Atlantic lay the next stage of the journey, a final destination where the Templars' greatest secret had waited, untouched, for hundreds of years. And someone was willing to kill to reach it first. The open sea stretched endlessly before them, waves crashing against the small boat as Eleanor and her team navigated using the Templar map. The coordinates, a combination of celestial markers and cryptic symbols, guided them toward an isolated cluster of islands, a place untouched by modern maps, whispered about in old maritime tales. After days of travel, they spotted land, jagged cliffs rising from the ocean, surrounded by swirling mists. Eleanor's heart pounded. According to the map, this was the first real test, a hidden sanctuary where the Templars had left not just treasure, but perhaps a relic of unimaginable power, something sacred enough that centuries of guardianship had preserved it from the world. They explored the shoreline cautiously, aware that the hunters could be following them across the Atlantic. At the base of the cliffs, Mark discovered a series of stone markers, carved with the same sun and crescent symbols. Eleanor realized they were standing on the exact spot indicated on the map, a concealed entrance to a cavern partially submerged by the tide. Inside the cavern, the air was cool and damp. Eleanor traced the walls, revealing additional carvings, cryptic instructions, star charts, and an icon resembling a chalice. This isn't just gold, as she whispered. The Templars had something far more significant: knowledge, power, a relic. From the shadows near the cavern mouth came the faint sound of movement. Their hunters had crossed oceans as well, relentless and prepared to stop at nothing. Eleanor knew the danger was greater than ever. To reach the Templars' ultimate secret, they would have to navigate the cavern and outsmart their pursuers, or risk losing history itself forever. The cavern's walls narrowed as Eleanor and her team ventured deeper, their lanterns flickering against jagged stone. Each step echoed like a drumbeat, amplifying the tension. Symbols carved into the walls glimmered faintly under the lantern light, guiding them toward the heart of the cavern. The air grew cooler, heavy with the scent of salt and ancient stone. At the end of the tunnel, a circular chamber opened before them. In the center, resting on a pedestal of black stone, was the relic, a chalice encrusted with emeralds and inscribed with the sun and crescent emblem seen across Rosslyn, Bannockburn, and the Caribbean maps. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, radiating a presence that seemed almost alive, as though the centuries of secrecy had imbued it with an aura of power. Eleanor approached cautiously, reverently lifting the chalice. Its weight was light, yet the significance pressed heavily upon her. She realized the Templars had protected not just wealth, but something sacred, a symbol of knowledge, faith, and perhaps even untold power. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps grew louder behind them. Their hunters had found the cavern entrance. Eleanor and her team had no time to ponder the chalice's mysteries. They had to escape. She tucked the relic safely into her pack, signaling to Mark and the others. As they turned to flee, rocks shifted ominously, and a small landslide nearly trapped them in the chamber. Eleanor felt her pulse spike. Centuries of secrets were now in motion, and one misstep could end their quest or their lives. With the hunters closing in, the chase was about to reach a perilous climax, and the Templar secret teetered on the edge of exposure. The cavern shook as Eleanor and her team scrambled toward the exit, their lanterns casting frantic shadows on the walls. Rocks tumbled around them, threatening to block the passage, while the distant echoes of their pursuers' voices grew louder, closer. Every step was a gamble. The centuries-old stone threatened to collapse underfoot. Emerging onto the jagged cliffs above the ocean, the team paused to catch their breath. The sun had dipped low, painting the sea in fiery shades of gold and crimson. Ahead lay the final destination marked on the Templar maps, an isolated isle, rumored to hold the culmination of the Order's centuries-long secret. According to the relic's inscriptions, this was where all paths converged, the resting place of the fleet's treasure and the ultimate Templar secret. With the chalice and maps safely secured, Eleanor guided the small boat through treacherous waters, navigating reefs barely visible above the waves. The hunters were relentless. A dark silhouette appeared briefly on the horizon, riding a faster vessel, keeping pace with alarming precision. As night fell, the team finally glimpsed the final isle, shrouded in mist and mystery. Ancient ruins dotted its cliffs, and strange symbols hinted at hidden passageways carved into the rock. Eleanor knew that the final trial awaited, one that would demand courage, intellect, and unwavering resolve. "This is it," as she whispered, eyes fixed on the misty island. The secret the Templars guarded for centuries, it's right there. Yet, the hunters' relentless pursuit reminded them that the greatest danger wasn't just the island itself, it was the people who would kill to claim what the Templars had protected for generations. The mist-shrouded isle rose like a phantom before Eleanor's team. Every step toward the ruins felt heavier. Centuries of secrets seemed to press upon them. As they approached a crumbled stone temple at the island's center, Eleanor noticed symbols etched into the walls, familiar sun and crescent emblems, alongside warning glyphs. The Templars had anticipated intruders and had left subtle puzzles and traps to guard the treasure. Mark carefully examined the ground. Pressure plates, ear-hidden triggers. "We'll have to move slowly." Eleanor nodded. Together, they navigated the labyrinth of crumbling corridors, avoiding pitfalls and concealed spikes. At last, they reached a chamber, its ceiling vaulted and walls adorned with carvings of the Templar fleet and celestial charts. In the center stood a stone pedestal, and atop it, an ornate chest glimmered faintly in the lantern light. But the hunters were close. The door behind them creaked, and they heard heavy footsteps approaching. Eleanor opened the chest with trembling hands. Inside lay the culmination of centuries, gold coins, sacred relics, and a series of manuscripts detailing the Templars' hidden network and knowledge that could change the understanding of history itself. The hunters burst in, weapons drawn. A tense standoff ensued. Eleanor held up the chalice from the Caribbean chamber. "This isn't yours to take," as she shouted. Her voice echoed through the temple. In a calculated move, she activated a hidden mechanism, releasing a cascade of stones that blocked the entrance temporarily, giving her team time to escape with the treasure and relics. As they fled into the misty jungle, Eleanor knew the secret of the Templars was finally in safe hands, but the world beyond the island would soon discover that some mysteries were not meant to remain buried forever. Eleanor's team emerged from the jungle, exhausted but victorious. The sun rose over the Atlantic, casting golden light on the waves that had carried them to and from the hidden isle. In their hands were relics, manuscripts, and maps, the culmination of centuries of secrets, now preserved from those who would misuse them. Back on the mainland, Eleanor reflected on the journey. The Templars had not only hidden wealth, but knowledge, faith, and a vision for a world shaped by wisdom and courage. She carefully catalogued every artifact, every symbol, knowing that their preservation was now her responsibility. The treasure itself was only part of the story. The true legacy lay in the lessons and mysteries the Order had left behind. But even as she documented their discoveries, Eleanor felt a stirring of unease. Somewhere, the hunters were still out there, waiting for a moment of weakness. And across the oceans, the echoes of the Templar's secrets whispered to those with eyes to see them. Eleanor gazed at the horizon, the chalice gleaming in her hands. "This is only the beginning," she whispered. "History has a way of repeating itself, and some mysteries never truly end." The lost Templar treasure had been found, but the adventure, the hunt, the secrets, the legacy would continue. Across continents, through time, the Order's hidden influence would endure, leaving whispers of gold, knowledge, and danger for those bold enough to seek them. And so, the story closed for now, but the legend of the Templars and the treasures they guarded would live on forever.